This week on BSD Now, we're going to be talking to Ken more about the Lumina desktop environment, where it stands now, and of course, looking ahead. Then Allan turns the tables and interviews both myself and Ken about new ongoings in PC-BSD land. Stay tuned. Lots of exciting shows coming your way right now on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 126, Illuminating the Future on PC-BSD, recorded January 27th, 2016. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Allan Jude.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you guys with us this week. We got another exciting episode. We got a really cool interview we did with a couple sharp guys from the PC-BSD project, so you'll have to stick around for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. We changed it up a little bit on you this week, so hopefully you'll enjoy that. But of course, we got a lot of news to get to as well. So stick around. We'll get to that interview in a minute. But we got some headlines to dig right into here. It looks like a couple long stories. You took a lot of notes on this first one, Allan. So
yeah, well,
you have to walk us through.
It's a long article.
That is true. That is true. So I guess it's Linux Voice again, who we mentioned did their roundup of the BSD distros last week. So what have they done this week?
So they did a rundown of different NAS solutions, including FreeNAS, NAS for Free, Open Media Vault, Open Filer Community Edition, Easy NAS, and Turnkey Linux File Server. They say many different NAS solutions can do a lot more than just backup and restore files. They can extend them with plugins and do a variety of other tasks. Some enable you to stream media to computers and other devices, and others can hook up with apps or services to allow you to use the NAS directly for storing and retrieving data. And so then they broke down a bunch of the different ones. The Open Media Vault, which is one of the Linux-based ones, they say is a feature-rich NAS distro that's easy to deploy and manage. They like that it has quite a few plugins and a good UI, and they gave that a 4 out of 5. For the Turnkey Linux File Server, they only give it a 2 out of 5, saying it's a no-fuss distro, and it'll get you sharing files in no time, but it doesn't have any RAID or LVM functionality. The LVM stuff is there, but you have to do it manually. And it's like, well, what's the point of a NAS if it doesn't provide data security, right?
That's true. That is true.
With the Open Filer Community Edition, they give it a 1 out of 5. They say there's a target segment for Open Filer somewhere, but we can't spot it. Currently, they say it's in the middle of rebasing off a Linux distro that's defunct. It was called like RPath or something. And they're switching it to CentOS, but they've never got further than a development version on that. And there seems to be very little documentation. And while the UI has lots and lots of different options, it's all cluttered and confusing and very hard to use.
Interesting.
So then they have Easy NAS, which they say is a simple NAS distro that balances the availability of features with reasonable assumptions on what you probably want to do by default. But they say the problem there is major upgrades require reinstalling. So installing incremental updates is fine. But every time they do a major release, you're expected to just reinstall and then import your data on the new one.
Well, that's kind of painful.
And it lacks advanced features and some of the more advanced protocols for sharing. So if you just want basic file sharing for home, it's probably good. But if you want to do something more, it doesn't seem to be good enough. So they give that 3 out of 5. And then they compared NAS for Free and FreeNAS and kind of give a little bit of the history on how those two, what's the same and what's different about them. And they note, they say NAS for Free is an advanced NAS distro that's designed for advanced users. They like the additional flexibility with disk layout, how you can use a partition or something instead of always just a whole disk. So that, you could partition off a bit of the first disk and use that to install the actual OS on instead of, say, a USB stick or a SATA DOM or something. And then, use a partition on every disk to do that. But they preferred FreeNAS because of the better documentation. They like the way you manage ZFS snapshots better. They've had more plugins, whereas NAS for Free doesn't have plugins. It just has a couple of built-in features for like DLNA. And they like that the plugins ran in jails, so that if there's a problem, they're less likely able to like clobber all your data. And they noted that FreeNAS has the most enterprise features, like Active Directory integration and so But they gave both NAS for free and FreeNAS only a 3 out of 5. They say, if we had to award this group test to the distro with the biggest number of features, then the top 2 challengers would have been FreeNAS and then NAS for free. While both of these solutions pitch themselves to users outside of the corporate environment, they'd simply be overkill for most home users. I would say most home users would disagree with you on that.
Yeah, I say.
Yeah. They say,
ZFS is awesome for the home.
Yeah. They say, furthermore, their FreeBSD base and the ZFS file system, while a boon to the enterprise users, virtually makes them alien technology to the average Linux household. It's like, well, just because it's different doesn't mean you don't want to use it. ZFS is better. What are you going to run everything on XFS?
When we usually say alien technology, we mean more advanced.
Exactly.
Comes down out of the sky and Yeah, so I'm okay.
So I guess their point was they were picking based on I'm already a Linux user and I want something that I'm Linuxy with. It's like, well, usually the point of the NAS is it sits in the corner and I don't want to have to know that it runs Linux, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing was they gave both NAS for free and FreeNAS the same score, but when you read the description, they were, they definitely preferred FreeNAS over it. So why did they give it the same score? It seems like they just didn't want to give it a 4 out of 5 because then it would have the same rating as the
would have been on
the Linux one that they picked as the best.
Yeah.
But they gave a good rundown and talked about all the features. I just don't know if they're if you read the article yourself, you will likely find different rating numbers to each of the different options.
Okay, well, still an interesting one, and it's nice to see that they're covering some of the different BSD-related projects. So that's good. That's still a win for us.
Exactly.
Okay, so what's this next one we have here? I guess a new tutorial over at unixmen.com talking about FreeBSD-based snort IPS?
Yes.
So how are they doing that?
So this is actually a pretty involved tutorial, but they combine a bunch of different apps together to build a fully functional intrusion prevention system. So if you had snort just by itself, it's only an IDS, intrusion detection system. It can tell you when it looks like you're being scanned or somebody's trying to do X or Y to you. But by combining it with Snort Sam, Barnyard, Oink Master, and a few other things, you can actually turn it into an intrusion prevention system where based on snort detecting a problem and it meeting certain other rules, you can actually have it block the traffic with firewall. Okay. So it walks you through it. It's the overview is not so bad, and then it gives right down to like which options to compile the ports with and what to put in the config files. It's very detailed and should be pretty easy to follow. But basically, it starts off with your basic Apache PHP MySQL setup, then adding snort to that. And downloading the latest snort rules from the snort website. And even a caveat here, on newer FreeBSD, you have US bus, or USB US, which basically provides you, it makes your USB ports actually show up as possibly Ethernet interfaces, but that confuses snort because it's expecting those to be Ethernet interfaces. So it provides the sysctl you can set to avoid hooking those up to the packet filter. And that solves that problem. Then you install Oink Master and Barnyard and configure those. And now you have a very nice IDS setup. Then they install Snorby, which is a web interface. Mostly it's kind of like a dashboard that kind of lets you see what's happening. Scrolling down to a screenshot here. But basically, it can actually show you like a graph of incoming things that snort is detecting and classifying those by severity and so on. It actually looks very nice.
So should I be running this on my firewall?
You could. The other nice thing is Snorby also works with Suricata, the thing we talked about the other week that's integrated into pfSense and OpenSense now. Sorry, this is a long tutorial, so it's taking a minute to scroll down to the part I'm trying to find here. Anyway, once you set up Snorby, then you also want to set up Snort SAM, which is the thing that actually connects Snort with IPFW. And then you can basically have Snort SAM set up firewall rules based on what is detected. So yeah, once you got Snorby figured, then you get a screen like this. And you can see the number of high severity, medium severity, and low severity incidents that the intrusion prevention system has detected. And you can drill down into those and classify them and so on. And
this looks pretty neat.
you can see, which ones are people trying to log in over SSH, or which ones are, a policy violation that means a user inside your network tried to go to Facebook and maybe you don't want to allow that, or, when it was something that's been detected as a virus infection. It's like if a client on your network is trying to reach this certain website that we know is the command and control server for malware, then you can actually detect that here and not only block the virus from getting commands from command and control, but identify which machine it is and go have it be fixed. But yeah, and then once you hook it up with SnortSam, it can actually automatically take action based on these as well. And then you
looks like they're connecting it to IPFW in this case.
Yeah. And then it seems to work very nicely. But like I said, it's very detailed. It has example configurations with a bit of explanation for each one. So it should be fairly straightforward to follow this and set it up.
Yeah, that's practically a tutorial in and of itself.
Yeah. There's basically a mini tutorial for each of these apps, and it even covers how to make them all work together. This tutorial basically can allow you build your own security appliance out of it.
Yeah, it's pretty
nice.
It's
very nice.
If only I had unlimited time, right?
Yeah, I know.
These are all the things I would love to sit around and play with.
The number of things I would love to finish this week, and the actual number of things I will finish this week is none.
Mm-hmm.
I have to get on a plane tomorrow.
I understand.
FOSDEM.
Okay,
Yes.
well, cool. Well, check that out. Maybe one of you guys can try that out since Allan and I get so busy with other stuff, and write to us. Let us know how your experience with that goes. Okay, so next up we have opensource.com has done a recent interview that featured a couple different BSD developers as examples of how open source can help your career. So who specifically did the interview on this one, Allan?
They had Alexander Yurchenko from OpenBSD, and then the other BSD person was Alexander Polyakov, who is a Dragonfly contributor.
Okay.
But starting with the first Alexander, he's an OpenBSD developer and had been for a while, and then he managed to turn that into a job at Yandex, which is a big search engine in Russia.
Nice. Yeah.
He says participating in such a project, he's talking about OpenBSD, yields colossal experience. A good large open source project has many of the typical skills required for a developer at job interviews, like good planning, writing good code, using a versioning system, using the bug tracker, getting peer review, working with other people, and so on. I would definitely agree with that. I would say, open source, since you're volunteering to work with these people, you have to be that much better at teamwork to get things done because, if you're bad at it, people aren't going to want to work with you. Whereas at work, they kind of have to. But with open source, they kind of don't. And he goes on, he says, so after stewing in such an environment for a year or two, you have a very good opportunity to grow to be a senior developer.
Well, he says here that's in fact what happened to me. I was hired as a senior developer without having any formal work experience on my service record. After the first week, my probation period was redacted from 3 months to 0. Yep. So, see, you need to work on a BSD project.
Yeah, and while you may not have formal work experience, if you've contributed to an open source project, then you have this body of work, a portfolio of code or documentation or whatever it is that you contributed to the open source project that you can point people to. If it's on GitHub or in the SVN repo or the mailing list or whatever, but you can show that, hey, I wrote this code and people use it every day.
Yeah.
And also people that didn't have to use my code accepted it and are happy with it. That
in my mind, that's one of the genius things about using the GitHub, because we have a developer and I look at what they've done. I'm like, okay, it's time to, ask them about a commit bit because they've done some cool stuff.
Yeah. But it gives you this portfolio that you can show. And, while having X years experience working at some company that does something similar, says a certain amount of things about you, having a bunch of code that I can actually look at and decide whether I like tells me a lot more about you as a programmer and if I want to work with you, I think.
That's true. That's true. It's all in the open. You can look at the quality and depth of it.
And also even just what are the quality of the commit messages they wrote for it? And, how frequently did they work and so on. And then the second Alexander, Polyakov, who's a Dragonfly contributor, he said he worked on updating support for other languages, especially on the website, and then on the ACPI stack in Dragonfly. He says he even made some money in the process. A customer found that he had been the last person to do a lot of work on the ACPI stack by going through the Git logs, and they wanted to use Dragonfly in production and needed better ACPI support and some RAID drivers. So when they looked at the Git log and saw the last person do a bunch of work on ACPI, they emailed them. It's like, hey, we need some more ACPI support. How would you like to do that for us? And that's how he got a job. It says, in a nutshell, contributing to open source projects is how you gain great experience. Don't be afraid to send in bad code. It happens to all of us, but, oftentimes is better than no code. But remember to, keep calm when they say, hey, could you polish this up a little bit or do it this way that we do it in the project or make use of this framework we already have. But, choose a project you're really interested in because it'll help you overcome that little bit of feedback. And then you'll both gain experience and have fun while doing it.
Nice.
And then the third developer they interviewed was Kirill Gukunov, who works for OpenVZ on Linux stuff. And he talked about his experience, saying, for a few years, I've been fixing the code, sending patches, getting scalded for bad code, and complimented for good code. That experience was priceless. And then you can be sure that as soon as you get good at it, the job offers will follow. This is in fact how I met the kernel developers working on OpenVZ, and together we decided to continue working on the OpenVZ kernel and a bunch of related stuff. And so he turned that into a job. When you contribute to open source, you end up kind of getting this reputation as the person who wrote foo. And then, that can often turn into work because someone wants to build something on top of foo or something like foo. And so they're like, well, you're the foo guy. So
yeah, they go to the source.
Yeah.
Nice. And so I guess there was a panel at the FreeBSD Foundation organized about this as well.
Yeah. So before EuroBSDCon in Sweden last year, Drew, Deb, Dan, Benedict, and I did a panel about open source as a career path at a university in Sweden. And it was mostly targeted at people who are just about to leave school. There was a job fair before the conference where they were talking, people are looking for internships and so on. And we're like, well, we can't give you an internship, but we can give you some resume entries of, here's some code I actually wrote that, Netflix uses to deliver 1/3 of all of the traffic on the internet.
Sure.
That kind of says something on your resume.
It does.
Yeah. And so we were basically talking about how even each of us that was on the panel does open source as our career now, but each in a very different way. I kind of just did it from the business side. I started using FreeBSD and got very good at it and was able to sell that as a service. And then Benedict went through school for it, and now he is the system administrator for the computer cluster at a university. Or Dan, who's just turned it into a side business of running conferences. And, Drew, who started just writing documentation and turned that into book deals. Or Deb, who's, was a developer for a long time and then got into the foundation side of it and running the nonprofit.
Yeah, the list kind of goes on. I think a lot of the stories will be similar like that. If you go to one of these conferences and just ask, show of hands, how many people got their start at their current place of work because of their open source experience. And I think that's a pretty common theme we're seeing more and more of.
And, it's the perfect solution for the people like, well, every job wants experience and I don't really have any. Well, open source doesn't require any experience.
Yeah, that's so. I've had this come up multiple times here. I've had people ask, about internships and, what do you recommend? Parents come to me when their kid's getting ready to go to college. Like, what can they do to develop their skills so they'll be ready for a job after college? And usually my response is something along the lines of find an open source project, get involved.
Yep.
Get your name out there, get your name attached to commits, get your name in the logs, And then when you are ready to graduate, even if it's something small you did, it's something. And when when I'm looking at resumes, or IX is looking at resumes, or when people are looking at resumes, and we can look and go, they actually did the thing that we want them to do versus, well, they took a couple classes on it in college. Like, I'm going to 9 times out of 10, I'm going to go with the guy who actually has done it, and I can look and see that they've done commits, because that shows me they probably know how to use, version control systems and Git, and they already have some basic concept of compiling versus they took a couple classes on Java or something at college, right?
Yeah, well, that's actually exactly how we ended up with the developer we have at our company. It was actually for a previous thing. I was working at a startup incubator thing at the college, and we were looking for a developer to take over some work I had started. And so we interviewed a bunch of students, and it was like, well, basically all these students have taken the 1 semester PHP class that is on as part of the curriculum. But this one did a little bit of work on it at a job placement they did over the summer, and this guy is trying to write a little web-based game in PHP in his spare time. It's like, I'm going to take that guy because A, he has more experience, and B, he shows a willingness to actually want to do something with it.
Yeah, he's already getting enough enjoyment out of the coding to do it on his own spare time. And that's what I've told him. Like, don't expect it to be a paid thing right away. No. Do stuff on your own time. And there's no excuse. Like, even if you're working full time, on the weekend, do a little bit of code. And,
it doesn't have to be code even, builder. Right?
Yeah.
Writing the ZFS section of the FreeBSD handbook probably would be enough to get any job as someone who needed a sysadmin to run their ZFS thing, right?
Sure.
That's
right. It doesn't necessarily have to be actual code, but if it's something that you can point to out in the open and say, "I've done this," then that's a good deal.
And even just I wrote this plugin for Minecraft, right? How many kids right now love Minecraft and learn programming? It's like having that on your resume. It's like, I maintain this popular Minecraft plugin that lots of people use. That's a resume item. Don't forget to put it on your resume.
That's all good stuff. No, I agree fully, 100%. This is definitely the way to go in the future.
Yep.
Okay, well, last up here in the headlines this week, we have one I saw on Twitter a little bit earlier, but on the FreeBSD wiki, Bernard Spill, who we've interviewed on the show before, he's a FreeBSD developer, a ports committer now, who was doing all the LibreSSL stuff. Well, he started a new walkthrough up on the wiki page talking about how he's using LibreSSL and Let's Encrypt without using the standard heavy Python client that you normally use with Let's Encrypt, which we featured, gosh, I don't know how many shows ago now. It's been a little bit.
Yes.
But we talked about that a ways back when it first landed in ports and Let's Encrypt went public and everyone can use it now.
Yeah, when Marie sent us her tutorial on how to do it.
That's right. So this article is pretty interesting, though. It provides detailed instructions on how you can go about prepping your system and automating the process of updating SSL certificates, of course, using Let's Encrypt, but without using that Python-based client that's out in the ports tree. So you'll notice some differences in his method versus any of the official docs. A couple things I like here. One is that he keeps all his Acme challenge files in a single directory, so you're not having stuff scattered across different domains and subdomains and in different spots on your system. And then he just aliases everything into the domain. So that was a cool idea, and I don't know why I didn't think of doing that before when I set it up, but hey, live and learn, right? This is a great thing here. And he said also using this method that he has documented here on the wiki allows you to run the Let's Encrypt authentication portion as root, or not as root. So you don't have to be root when you run the cron job or whatever. And then when you're ready to publish it, you can run that one command as root later to publish the certs and make them live. So definitely a neat idea here, kind of a little bit of privilege separation. And he also points to some Bash and ZSH scripts that you can download, which will automate some of this for you. So,
yeah, especially I think it's updating the certificates because they expire fairly quickly with Let's Encrypt.
Yeah,
right?
they do. I think 90 days or something like that. So you have to update them fairly frequently. So you'll want to grab his script if you're going to do this, and that'll help walk you through it. And he has examples of how to automate it in cron, etc. But all in all, good work, Bernard. This is pretty slick. I may have to switch my setup over to it here soon. And he mentions that this may be turned into a port here before too long. So definitely +1 to that. Make that happen. I would love to just package add and be able to do this because this seems a lot lighter weight. And it has some concept to jails as well, which is pretty cool. So I'm all over that.
That's usually the point is you want to keep the web server in the jail. And so being able to Let's Encrypt manage all the certs in all your jails would be really handy.
Well, and I like too, since this is Bernard doing it that we're talking about, he has it hard coded to use your OpenSSL, or in his case, LibreSSL, that you've installed via ports or packages, not the base system one.
Yep. So you get
which I don't think the other client really had a
version.
concept of that.
Yeah.
But this is definitely a big one for me because I'm running LibreSSL on all my systems. So again, another reason why I want to switch over to this. So if you guys are doing anything with Let's Encrypt, definitely give this a look. And I don't know if this is all super free BSD specific. I don't know why this wouldn't work on other BSDs as well.
No, I don't think there's, other than the fetch command for a couple things, which you would just use FTP on OpenBSD or NetBSD.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the flag to specify the local file name is slightly different. But other than that, I think it's all good to go.
This should be very portable. Matter of fact, probably more so than the Python script if it's not in the repos for Open and Net and Dragonfly and all that already.
Indeed.
But anyway, give that a shot. Maybe that'll work on your other systems as well. Okay, so before we get to this awesome interview, which I teased earlier, we do have our first sponsor this week we have to mention, which is going to be IX Systems. And the website for that is going to be, of course, ixsystems.com. But don't forget that /BSD Now at the end.
Yes.
We want that because that way they know you heard about it here. And if you just go direct and call them, mention that you heard it here too. We like to know that our listeners are calling IX and they love hearing from you guys. So mention that and, they'll give you the special deal. Well, probably not, but they enjoy hearing from BSD Now listeners because they know that's a very special type of individual who's going to call and probably knows their stuff. So definitely mention that and they will be glad to talk to you all day and get you all set up with whatever you need for whatever the problem is you're trying to accomplish. So you have anything? So you were ordering something new here, Allan?
Yes, we were ordering the video transcoding server with the GPUs
you mentioned you were looking at two different ways to go about it, either the NVIDIA or something else. So
Intel QuickSync is what we're going to go with. So this is basically using the GPU that's built into the Intel chips. And kind of as a side note, while I was working on this, I was having quite a bit of trouble getting it working on Linux. And just for giggles, I tried libva and all that stuff on FreeBSD because compiling from ports means it'll just work every time. And it seems to just work.
Well, hey, that's a good thing.
To the point where when I get some free time, I think I might be able to hook it up with FFmpeg so that on FreeBSD, when you're transcoding video with FFmpeg, you can add an extra option to offload the transcoding to your GPU.
That would be nice.
Although,
see why you would find that useful.
It depends on having a GPU, an Intel GPU built into the chip. So most of your high-end Xeons don't. But the E3 Xeons, if the model number ends in a 5 or a 6, so instead of like a 1250, you have a 1275, that means it has the GPU built in. And then you can do that. We found that for the video transcoding we were trying to do, where you take in a 2 megabit 720p stream and make a 480 and a 360p outputs of it, it performed both equal to a dual processor 8-core 2.6 gigahertz Xeon. Each of those processors costing like $900 or something. On the Xeon E3, you can get for like $350.
Oh, that's a good deal.
Yeah.
See, when you tweak the software just right, look at that performance boost you're going to get.
Of course, this means I'm now more looking forward to updated i915 drivers because, the machine I tested on was Ivy Bridge, so we have i915 and it works, and it looks like the video transcoding can work there. But, if I get...
You need Haswell now?
Well, yes. But, the new server I'd be looking at buying would be Skylake.
Oh, okay. You need Skylake.
Yeah, suddenly.
I wonder, we almost need some different groups honestly, to sponsor some developers to do some stuff like that.
At this point, Linux barely supports that one.
Right? But, we need to get caught up, so we're right on the heels of it, right?
Yes, and we have news about that coming up, actually. Well, not FreeBSD, but Dragonfly. Oh. As you might expect.
Yeah, that's still exciting. Yes. Good for the Dragonfly guys. Maybe we have to hire one of those guys, right?
Yes.
But still, very cool. Well, again, folks, so we were mentioning IX Systems here. Don't forget, ixsystems.com/BSDNow. Go there, get in touch with them, let them get you hooked up with whatever product or solution you need for your business in 2016, and they will be glad to do it. Well, we're joined now by Ken Moore, who's my brother, actually, here at the PC-BSD project and also from IX Systems. But you've been on the show with us before, Ken, so first of all, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk about a bunch of different things today. But first up, it's been a little while since we've gotten a status update on the Lumina desktop. So where is it currently at functionality-wise since we last spoke? Gosh, who knows how long ago? It's been a while.
Well, the current version that is released right now is 0.8.7. It's still technically a beta, not because of stability issues, but because there's just some additional things that I'm still working on that I haven't finished up to add into it yet. I don't feel like it's feature complete yet, but what's there is there and works very well.
I run it all day here for those who want to know. So it actually got me off of KDE finally. So.
Yay!
I know, right?
I won over my brother. That's like the best praise I can ever get.
I'd been on KDE for so long, but to be honest, I still cheat a little. I have Dolphin that I sometimes use for the file management, but Lumina for everything else works just fine. So
exactly. I like to use Ocular for the PDF viewer as well. But that's the nice thing about Lumina. It doesn't come with all the utilities, so you get to pick what utilities you like, and so just use those instead of having a bunch of extra stuff just sitting there on the disk not doing anything.
That's nice. So where is it currently at functionality-wise since we last spoke? Have any new things been added or changed?
Since we last spoke, that was a long time ago. I want to say it was just out of an alpha last time.
I think so.
If you look at it now compared to the last time I was on with you, what is it, a year and a half ago now?
I think so,
like that?
Yeah, it's been a while.
You'll see that a lot has changed. One of the significant things being we now have built-in themes. So you can go in and actually change the entire appearance of your desktop in 1 or 2 clicks. Simply by selecting different types of themes, you can change different types of icon themes that you want to use, just stuff like that. Appearance-wise, it's significantly different. Functionality-wise, it's got the exact same basis. It's still completely plugin based. You can still, add and remove panels, plugins, either on the desktop, on the panels themselves. We've expanded a lot of that. So the desktop system, the system that actually puts stuff on the desktop background itself, that plugin system has actually been overhauled 1 or maybe 2 times since then.
Right.
So now it's actually completely drag and drop based, whereas before you had to lock and unlock the desktop in order to move things around. Now it acts much more like traditional, I'd say, Android systems or whatever, where you can just click and hold it for a second and then drag it around the screen to move it and resize it and things like that.
Yeah, you have like an Android-ish grid now where you can drag stuff around, see all the little grid points. Like, this is where I want to place these things.
So there's an invisible grid on the background that's always there, and everything is fixed to that grid. But then actually, if you go into the config UI or right-click on one of the desktop icons, like for a file or something, you can actually increase and decrease the size of that grid as well. So you can add more stuff onto the screen or give yourself more space if you shrink the grid and make it a little bit smaller.
Which I did for my 4K screen. It was actually really nice. I could just increase the grid points to a level where it was comfortable to look at.
I think since then I've even tried to make it a little bit more dynamic, so it tries to detect if you're on one of those crazy 4K monitors, and it just bumps the grid size up by default. So I think it's double the normal size
it looks
for
pretty
4K
good.
systems. But yeah, same basic system, but it's really easy to tweak then. Similarly, the panel system, it's all exactly the same there, but it's been expanded. So now panels are no longer fixed in size. You still have to assign it a screen edge, but you can now pick an anchor point, either one of the corners or the middle, and then change the size of the panel as well. So you can now have up to 3 panels on the same side of the screen if you would like, each with different functionality. You can make them hide and make them not hide. You can overwrite the theme appearance for the panel if you want as well. So like I said, lots of expansion, lots of visible things that are different.
Nice. Well, and I'm going to mention, since you didn't, the start button defaults got changed. That was my big gripe early on.
There are a lot of new plugins as well. The old user button is still around in an updated and overhauled state, so it works a lot better. In addition to that, we have more of a Linux type start button as well, which is just your application menu. So it pops up the categorized list of applications. And then we also have a start menu, which is more Windows-like. So you click on that, and that gives you Again, you have your application list, you have shortcuts to favorites, you have links to the control panel and stuff. It's a little bit more full-featured than the Linuxy application menu.
Well, you can go browse all applications, and you can right-click and say pin it to my favorites, or pin it to the taskbar, or pin it to the desktop. Like there's this whole pin system now.
Exactly.
Makes it really easy to add and remove things.
I even added a quick launch system to that. So if you pin it to the quick launch, it actually puts it on the tray right next to the start button itself. So it just, again, a nice simple way to add things around and move things around as you need to.
That's the biggest change I still make on my one Windows machine is on Windows 7 is getting rid of the old, the newer like large icon thing and going to the old Windows and bringing back a quick launch bar. And that's all the tools I use are on the quick launch bar. I never use the start menu.
That's exactly how I do it, Allan. Everything's on the quick launch, and then I put lesser used things on the favorites in the start menu. So I don't have to hunt through apps for them, but like K-Snapshot, which I use to take a picture occasionally.
I need to figure out there's some key combination I accidentally press sometimes that starts K-Snapshot.
It's a print screen.
No, it's not that. I'm
on mine.
You know what? It might be something to do with the fact that my laptop doesn't have a print screen button. No, it doesn't have a scroll lock button. It still has print screen, I think. I don't know. Somehow I'm pressing probably function in something instead of control in something by accident.
Right.
And it's just going crazy.
There are a number of different shortcuts that desktops use. So there might be 2 or 3 shortcuts that they have in addition to print screen. So you might be hitting one of those special ones.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But it causes it to go crazy.
He's fixed it up enough so I got all like the standard shortcuts I was used to from KDE. So I can do like Win key L to lock my screen, right?
Nice.
And just there's a lot of nice little shortcuts like that, which is helpful.
So that sounds all great. But what's currently in the pipeline for the next version?
I'm actually planning on another, what I'm calling a maintenance release here in probably a couple weeks, 088. This is going to be a lot of improvements for screen size adjustment detection. So if you're actually changing your resolution on the fly, it'll better detect that and adjust. There were a few bugs in 087 with that where it wasn't picking that up and modifying the desktop appropriately.
I can see that definitely being useful when you attach to like a projector for doing a presentation or even just a TV to watch a movie.
Yeah, it was working. The current 087 was working okay when you add and remove screens. The problem was changing your existing screen.
Right.
Because then it's trying to adjust settings on the fly instead of creating.
Well, especially like in a VM or something, right? And you adjust the resolution.
Exactly. So 088 has a lot of significant improvements with regards to that. The Lumina Xconfig utility, which is the front end to XR&R, now has support for changing resolution on the fly as well. So you can open that up to change your screen resolution for the current session. It doesn't save settings right now because XR&R really is just for running the local session. I don't have root privileges to modify your Xconfig directly. Just a bunch of things like that, a bunch of nice little improvements. I completely redid how icons are loaded from the icon theme. I no longer use the Qt from icon theme, I think is the function call, and I wrote something myself because that way we always load the icons that are the right size initially, which actually means we load fewer icons into memory because I already have the larger ones in size and I just scale them down instead of loading all the small icons and then also having to load the bigger icons later.
That makes sense.
So it just makes things a lot easier, a lot smoother. So you'll notice that as well, is that you won't see icons out of place or wrong size anymore.
Oh, cool. So what feature would you love to see land the most? In other words, if time wasn't a constraint necessarily.
Well, I suppose right now it's just the new window manager for Lumina. That's the big killer feature, which is coming in 090. That's when I'm done with the window manager. That's when I'm going to tag 090. So that's kind of the next big thing that I'm working on. I've gotten it, I'd say 50 to 60% done. The screensaver and screen locker systems are done. The window manager functionality itself is about 50 to 60% done. I have everything done and written. It's just tying them all together so that when the event comes in, it does the right thing and notifies the window to do it. Right now, they're all kind of operating independently. So it's just making all those connections and hooking them up so that it functions properly all the time instead of when I manually change them.
So that'll let us kick Fluxbox to the curb, right?
Yes, that will replace not only Fluxbox, it will also replace X Screensaver, which means you no longer need to have Perl installed on your system, as well as all those, Perl modules that X Screensaver tends to suck in as well. So it'll get rid of a lot of stuff. And basically, with the two of them working together, the desktop binary and the window manager binary, That will allow Lumina to start doing a whole lot of new things in the future as well, because we cover everything. We cover the entire X session with that. So we can use protocols outside the X standards, so that we can do things like kiosk management, parental controls, things like that, so that we can set it with one config file that both systems are aware of without having to have this hacked together communication protocol through X.
So will that have OpenGL for acceleration for the window manager? Do I get transparency?
Yes, you get transparency.
Yes. Okay.
You also get a window border that can be resized from any screen edge or any border on the window, unlike the little Fluxbox thing where you've only got the two on the bottom, the two little handles. So it's much more of a modern window manager.
Okay.
Cool. When will we see that?
I was hoping to have 090 done, or at least ready for people to use and test by, well, right now. I'm delaying it a little bit because of this new PC-BSD project that we've been working on. That's been taking up a lot more time than I was originally expecting. So, yeah, you can blame Kris for that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second.
Yes.
But, things happen.
It's an exciting project.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So how has the response been for Lumina on non-PC-BSD systems? I know when we first talked about it, we suddenly heard interest from every corner of the OS market, basically.
Yeah, it's pretty much everywhere right now. Most Linux distros have it somewhere, either through an alternate repo that you have to load into whatever package manager they're using, and then you can get it, or it's available on the official repo or whatnot. It's pretty much everywhere.
What BSDs?
The only BSD it's not available on right now, as far as I know, is NetBSD. And I actually heard from a couple guys recently who are trying to work on that for NetBSD so that they have an official version for NetBSD as well.
Nice.
So part of the things that you're also going to get in the next maintenance release is I overhauled the build system for Lumina, so that now for porters to other operating systems, I have a simple OS detect file, which is a QMake file. So you can actually go in there and tweak it specifically for your OS as needed, which should help it support all the special places that you got to install things for different distros. Like, for instance, Fedora. For 64-bit systems, the library needs to go in /lib64, but for 32-bit libraries, it has to go in /lib, but everything else is under user local. So it's...
Because why not?
Yeah, because I don't know. But anyway, this gives
let's not search user local lib, because...
Yeah, exactly. So this gives them the flexibility to put in those alternate paths and stuff, and it's all set out of box within the PC-BSD source repo. So instead of having to go through your package manager with their special scripts, now it's all directly from source itself. So even when you compile it on your own system, it'll automatically load those special OS flags because it's already been handled and set up for you.
Right. So if you're crazy and want to run like git master rather than the release version, you can do that even on your random Linux machine.
Exactly. Git master actually isn't all that crazy either, at least not for Lumina.
Oh, okay. But you know, the latest development craziness, I mean.
Yes, that would be the Devel branch.
Okay.
I always say load master, and that will be the Devel version, which is the preview of the upcoming version.
Cool.
Okay. So any features in particular you think would be a good place for maybe new developers to jump in and get their feet wet if they wanted to help out?
Oh, all sorts of things. Because Lumina is so plugin based, a really easy way to get started is write a plugin. I mean, they're really simple to write. Again, I've already got a base class for every single one of the plugins. So desktop plugin base, panel plugin base, stuff like that. So you just say, okay, this is a subclass of this, and then add your functionality, and boom, you can have it done in a day or two. Depending on how complicated it is, of course. You might want to make it take a little longer if it's a really complicated widget, but it's really simple with Qt.
Nice.
Cool. So I guess now switching gears, I don't really have a special video frame for it, but we're going to interview the pair of you together about your new project. So all the questions fall to me now. So I've heard that PC-BSD project is currently working hard on developing an entirely new Qt stack for system management. Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, so this was the aforementioned project that Ken got sucked into a little bit, which is why the window manager part's not done. So blame me if
Thanks,
you're
Kris.
upset. If you're upset that we don't have the window manager done for Lumina yet, but basically, what we're hacking on in the PC-BSD project, as you know, if you've ever run PC-BSD or have heard about it, we have an entire Qt stack for everything, right? All of our installer, all of our control panel, every tray app, everything's Qt based, and that's what makes the desktop work. Where we have GUIs for everything. So a little while back, I don't know how long ago, we started working on this. At least a couple months now, I think we've been talking about it. Yeah. But we came up with the idea of, well, why don't we separate that out and turn the Qt stack into two parts? So first up will be the back end, which will be an API specifically for controlling FreeBSD boxes. And the API will talk over WebSockets, is what we're going to be using in this case, to a separate Qt GUI. And the Qt GUI will no longer be system specific. In other words, not necessarily something that has to be run on PC-BSD. We can compile it and run it on other operating systems and use it to remotely drive any system anywhere. Right.
And those GUIs then will also be running at native speeds. You're not trying to manage it all through a web browser. You're actually running an app built for that operating system and runs full speed.
That's right. No crazy JavaScript, right?
Nope. No crazy JavaScript, no PHP, no nothing like that.
That's right. That's right. So anyway, that's kind of what we're doing. We're splitting them into two parts, and the idea being that the Qt GUIs you use on your PC-BSD desktop can also be used on any other operating system to control either PC-BSD or FreeBSD boxes as well. And what's kind of cool is that you'll have the same interface on both. So if you've installed PC-BSD and you like it and you know your way around, you could potentially load that on your OS X box or your Windows laptop or whatever and use it to manage your systems. So, cool. So that's kind of the high-level overview.
So what are the types of things you configure with it?
Everything.
Yes. the plan is to cover a wide gamut. I guess where we're starting is what we currently do right now. So what our existing stack does is things like package management. So App Cafe, for example. We've had a Warden GUI in the past, which will now be an IO Cage GUI. So jail management, user management, firewall management, services, disk
network management.
Life Preservers had an entire GUI. So, of course, backup and replication management. Like all that's going to be covered via the API. And the plan is to turn our Qt middleware. First of all, when I say Qt, don't get scared. It doesn't mean you have to install X or anything. It runs completely command line. It's a headless deal. But it doesn't require X to install the Qt core stuff for Qt5. But the plan is we'll just keep adding API calls until we have a reasonable amount to run all of our GUIs. And when that's done, we'll probably tag it as 1.0 and then work on extending the GUI now to new projects and new things that we've historically not managed in the past. And those will come as demand happens.
Yes, well, I'm just seeing, obvious integration points with my work on modernizing certain config files to make them more easily edited by an application, as well as a user and so on.
Yeah. So the back end is separated out into a couple pieces. We're calling the new project sysadm or sysadmin, if you want to refer to it that way. But it comes with a library, and so that's where we put all the stuff where it actually reads the config files, saves the config files. That's where libucl would be used as, we are changing things on FreeBSD boxes and stuff. So this is not a separate system from FreeBSD. It's actually changing the proper FreeBSD config files. So even if you load up or SSH into the system by hand and go open up a config file, you're seeing exactly what you set through the GUI, through the Qt GUI. It's not a separate config layer.
It's two-way, basically. There's no MySQL or some database in the middle that's actually keeping track of your config. If you edit stuff, the API will reflect that.
So that's the library that we install on the system. And then we also have a server component, which loads the library. And that's what provides the API calls to interact with the library and to provide access to remote systems through WebSockets or TCP.
Cool. So how does adding a new API call work? Is it easy enough to do if I have, say, for Scale Engine, we have some custom thing that's not really even FreeBSD specific. It's just we would like to manage our software using this, works from any operating system web GUI. How hard would it be to add our own API calls?
It's actually really, really simple. I specifically designed the framework that we've got right now so that you can add an API call for a brand new, what I'm calling a subsystem. You can add that into the server and have it running in less than a day.
Yeah.
For instance, the current Life Preserver implementation, that's actually the way it works. There, Life Preserver isn't in the sysadm library itself. Life Preserver is a separate script. It's a separate utility on the system. So all it is it's just a front-end API to manage and run that script or that utility on the system. And we even have it set up for the server to detect what subsystems are available. So if L Preserver is not available on the system, it'll say, "Oh, that's not available right now. You can't call that."
Yeah, maybe somebody didn't install it or remove
exactly.
it. Exactly.
But
or
then
it's a
I
pure
just
FreeBSD system and not a PC-BSD system or something like that. Yeah.
and then I use the package manager API to install it, and then
And then it will suddenly come available.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you can do the exact same thing with external utilities. So it doesn't have to go through the sysadm library. If you have some custom binary or utility that you use, you can just add it. I made it so it's just one file that you have to open up and edit, create one new function for handling your type of subsystem just to keep things separate from all the other subsystems, and then add in your API calls right there. Keeps it really simple. And then we always also have a URL or a website to try and document all these API calls as well.
To give you an example, yeah, we're working first of all on a full doc for this. So api.pcbsd.org has a site where Drew's been working on documenting that, and that's updated automatically whenever we commit something. But what happens is, so when I did Life Preserver, I've already done most of the back end for that. When I add a call to say create a replication target or create a snapshot schedule, it's one function that just takes JSON in, and you read that and figure out what the user's asking for and run your commands and then return JSON back to say this worked or it didn't work if something was wrong. I mean, I most of the calls are like 12 lines of code, so it's not very hard.
right,
It's really simple.
there'd be another call that would be like, "Hey, what's the current replication schedule?" And it would get that JSON it and fire it back at you.
That's right.
In addition to that, leveraging the power of WebSockets, we added a whole event subsystem there as well. So we have Life Preserver events, we have what are called dispatcher events as well. So since the WebSocket's basically a persistent connection, you can receive asynchronous events. You didn't ask for one, but one just comes through and says, "Hey, this just happened." So that's where you get things like a replication just kicked off. You just had a snapshot. So we can actually get status updates as well for each of the various subsystems too.
So if I had this running on my NAS and had the client sitting here on my Windows desktop, it could tell me that a disk is failing?
Yes.
Exactly.
So, okay, if you want to, here's the exciting part. This
Yeah,
is the part that gets me all worked up, right? I'm all like, oh, this is so cool. What I'm thinking, and again, this is all still really early days, so everything I'm about to say, take with a grain of salt. It may change. It may look different when it's all said and done. But the plan is you have, we'll say a PC-BSD desktop, like my work box here. And I can now associate with all the servers in the shed or at the new office, right? I will just package install the binary on the servers, connect to them, and my client saves all those. It has a management interface so you can add or remove clients at will. Well, that just sits at my tray, and now I receive notifications from all my servers when an event happens, and I can change the verbosity of that. So I only want errors, or I only want information, or I want everything, whatever. So I get notifications, hey, a snapshot just took place on this server, or a replication just took place and it was successful, or whatever I want. And the plan is where I can then scroll back through the history on those too. The API will have a way to get all the events back, so we can give it a timestamp and say, show me all the events since or from this time range. And I can go look at a server and make sure things happened when they were supposed to, and go back in time in case my client wasn't connected. For example, I'm traveling or something. But once I got my client all set up, what I want to do is we add a utility where you can export to a encrypted file, basically. All your configuration knobs and all the tokens for authorizing with your servers. Now I can take that and throw it on my laptop, and that laptop could be Windows, it could be OS X, doesn't matter. It's the same client running on all of them. Import it, and now I have access again to all my servers, and I can monitor events. I can bring up the GUI and configure things. If somebody shoots me a text or an email and says, hey, I need this user on this server created, oh, let me just click and boom, connect to that server, user manager, add user, done. Like doesn't even matter what system I'm on. I don't even have to SSH in anymore. And, that's kind of the idea behind all this. Again, and if you're on a PC-BSD box, it's the exact same thing if you're working locally. So this is how we're going to administrate PC-BSD desktops as well. It's just you're talking to your local system as opposed to something out there. But same thing, add a user, does it locally, or you can tell it to add a user, across the world, wherever your server happens to be, in the cloud, whatever.
I could now I'm picturing a cluster management mode where you say add a user and it does it to like 10 servers.
That's the next idea. So that would be a 2.0 feature, because we've discussed that too. Like, okay, the next evolution of this would be, I want to kick off package upgrades on 10 of my systems. Check, 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 check. All those do upgrades. Or, add a user to all these. And you basically, when you send a command, you say duplicate that across these systems. And then you build groups maybe. These are my web servers. These are my DNS servers, my email jails, whatever. And you could use it in a jail potentially too, which is kind of cool. Right? You can now manage all that from one utility very easily. So anyway, it's a neat idea, and we're excited by it. And the reason we're doing this is we try and be very close to FreeBSD and PC-BSD. So the idea is I want this to be a package where I can just package add this on a FreeBSD box or a PC-BSD box or in a new jail I've just spun up. Exactly. And now I can administrate it all graphically. And, if I get really crazy, I might even change the installer to be all driven this way as well. So you could potentially point it at a new server you've spun up in the cloud or a new system that's come up on the network, and you don't even have to be connected to the console. You can just point it at that address, authenticate, and walk through the installation.
I can definitely see that being useful for appliance type things like a pfSense or a FreeNAS and so on, where it's going to be headless. So if you save me from having to connect a monitor and a keyboard to it the first time, and I just plug it into the network and then go to my laptop using any OS I happen to be on and just set it up.
We might do some fancy MDNS thing where it looks and goes, ooh, this machine just popped up on the network. Would you like to install it? Yeah, that's all the goal. Again, this is way out here, right? But we're taking the small steps to get there. Yeah, it's keeping us very busy.
This is very exciting. So on top of WebSockets, you have a REST API. Is that all the same, or what's the difference there?
Yes. It's actually the same binary and the same sources, but you can run it in two different modes, and you can run two versions of the binary, one of them over a standard TCP socket for REST calls, and one of them over WebSockets for the JSON input and output. So I have a conversion routine in the source itself, so it will transfer any REST input to pure JSON. So all the backend systems, when you write it in the source file, you don't need to worry about which server is running it. It always sees JSON. You send in JSON, you get out JSON. And then the server itself, depending on which mode it's in, takes that and then converts it back and forth from REST as needed.
Right. I guess the main advantage there is REST is easier to, I could write a script or tool to talk to us this way, whereas WebSockets is more designed for interactive.
When we first started on it, it was only WebSockets. Then I was like, I want to do REST too, because I was thinking of shell scripting. I'm like, it would be kind of cool if I have this awesome API, if I could just write a quick script to, for example, do an installation or something, right? And now we can do that. And the cool thing is, all of Life Preserver, for example, is now REST driven as well as WebSockets, because it's all there. I only had to write the call once. All it cares is it's getting JSON in and JSON out, and then the server handles, how that gets sent back, the reply.
Yeah, it handles the formatting of the input-output. So this actually means that by adding an API call to some other utility, you have now RESTified that utility, as well as made it available through JSON and WebSockets, all in an instant. So it makes it very, very extensible.
That's cool. Are there any limitations to the REST API versus the WebSockets one?
There are a couple.
So WebSockets you can get events on, right? It's a persistent connection, so you get your notifications. So REST is more of I'm submitting a request, and I'll just sit here and block until I get my response back. Whereas WebSockets, you can do a drive-by, hey, go start this backup, and notify. I'll get the event later when it's done, right? So REST, what we're going to have to do is nearly all the API calls are going to be the same, but with REST, if you're scripting things, you'll have to do polling occasionally, if you want
to see
to
if it's done yet or whatever, what the progress is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So if you want to get that status back of how much of the replication's been done, you'll have to pull it every so often to find out. But that's just a limitation of how REST works versus WebSockets. So,
Yeah.
but at least we offer it though. So if that's your thing and you like REST, you can use it. We're not gonna, we won't judge.
So on that same idea, would it be possible to maybe have I configure the thing that runs on the actual server with a callback URL for notifications? Because obviously with WebSockets you have notifications, but if you could say, hey server, when a disk fails, do a REST call to this server over here, which will cause, automatically send somebody to replace the hard drive or something.
So consider that a feature request.
Yeah, not at the moment.
Yeah,
Yes.
not at the moment.
No,
but there's
but
no
that's-
reason we couldn't add a new API call to say, give me a callback.
Yeah,
or
here's a callback
flag.
URL, and if you have a notification, send REST callback to this URL.
Yeah.
That's entirely doable. Yeah. Well, anyway.
And even with the way I've got it
feature
set
request.
up, I could do that fairly easily, actually.
Cool.
Yeah. That just sounds like another JSON field. Like, by the way, here's my callback.
Yep.
Send me a reply here when this is done.
Yeah, I guess that would also work as an option for instead of polling for the backup kind of thing. It's like start a backup and when you're done, call me back here. Although depending on what the REST client is, it might want one or the other.
Yeah. Well, say like when I script, I don't have anything listening for callback.
Right.
So it's going to have to be a poll.
But if I'm doing a cluster management where I have 1,000 servers, maybe they can just call me when something happens.
That makes sense. Well, that'll be a good feature request. We'll throw that in the hopper and see if we
That's a
can
good
get that
one.
added.
So on the client side, you said that this be used to remote control systems. Is there anything special about the management UI?
Well, you want to go ahead, Ken, first?
No,
or-
you start.
Okay. So obviously the big thing we mentioned is having it multi-platform. So on the client side, since everything's talking over WebSockets, we're system agnostic there. It's just straight up Qt. We're trying not to suck in any external libraries. We're just going to use Qt to basically design and render the widgets, which if we can hold to that, that means we'll always be able to roll binaries for Windows and for OS X, which, speaking of which, I've already automated that. We have our first OS X binaries and Windows binaries done. They don't really do much of anything yet, aside from just associate. They do the authorization, then let you manually send JSON back and forth to try it out. All the work right now is happening on the server side at the moment. But the plan is if we keep it all Qt, I mean, there's no reason down the road we couldn't change it up a little bit and have an Android version or have an iOS version as well. We're thinking ahead mobile here, right? If it's pure Qt, all of a sudden these doors get open, right? Oh, well, maybe we have a touch-based system where it's like I load it on my phone, I connect and go, this server needs this done, click, push buttons and things happen.
And it's actually using a fairly small subset of the Qt modules as well.
Yeah.
Because it's just the graphical modules, it's just the widgets, it's just the WebSockets, and that's it. That's pretty much all it is.
Very, very portable. And we will even do Linux binaries too for those who want to run it natively on Linux. That's in the plan as well.
Yep.
So, that's what's going to be kind of special. And the whole idea of being able to basically set up your profile once, save it, and then export it just seems really handy. Like I have my home office, but we're setting up a new office. So being able to export all of my system management stuff to my work computer or to my laptop. So when I'm in Tokyo, maybe I can just fire up the laptop and connect and see all the events. Oh yeah, all my backups took place. All my replications are good. Nobody's low on disk space. Everyone's happy, right? I can continue to do that from the road.
Exactly.
And by the way, I should mention everything's done over SSL, and yes, we're encrypting everything. That's all done by default. And we've even talked about, we haven't coded it yet, but this is something that will go in the near future, doing
later this week, to be honest.
Doing brute force detection too. So one of the things that's always irked me about a lot of these services that we leave running on the internet, even SSH, is we end up running other things to secure them. In other words, two-factor authentication or brute force blocking. You got to run something else to detect when that's happening. So the plan is to integrate that directly into the server. So we'll have brute force detection and be able to block IPs and policies for handling all that stuff just built right in, so we don't have to develop a third-party script to do what it probably should have just done out of box.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And both both the REST server and the WebSocket server will use exactly the same configs and the exact same settings. So you can run both of them at the exact same time, and they'll both use one config.
Yeah, they just run on different ports, so you can have one or both.
Awesome. So what timetable are you looking at getting this to replace the PC-BSD management toolchain?
11.0 would be wonderful.
That's why the huge scramble for me to spend so much time on this.
So this is why Ken's so busy and the window manager is not happening right now. Is we're targeting 11.0. I'm a realistic guy though, and that may or may not happen. So don't hold me to it, and don't hold Ken to it. Don't blame us if it's not quite ready by then. But the plan is now the server's kind of firming up a little bit, and we're starting to actually have a fair amount of usable APIs. I'll start putting them into the Edge packages probably in the next couple weeks, so we can start playing with it. And once it's there, then we'll just keep hacking on it. And when it's got enough of the functionality ready that we can flip the bit and remove the old Qt stack and go to the new one, we'll do that. Yep. But I imagine there will be a period, at least if you're on our current branches, where we have dual stack. You can run both until we've confirmed that it does what it needs to do.
Yeah, we're going to try and gradually roll it in and replace utilities as they become available in the new one.
Well, yes, that's usually the best way to do it. Otherwise, you end up with angry users like, I used to be able to actually, create a jail, and now I can't.
I want to make sure we're not losing anything in the transition.
Exactly. So one of the first clients that is on my list is actually a new app cafe. Simply because the current app cafe that we have, the web-driven one, also requires, what is it, Nginx and PHP and a couple other things. So the core of what we started with the server was actually something similar to what I had initially written for Syscache. This is going to basically replace that and function as a drop-in replacement. So since I've already got all those same subsystems in place, the App Cafe seems like a logical first step because I've already got everything I need to write a client for that.
Nice.
Which would be really cool. It'd be nice to have that. Man, if I could package ad stuff from my Windows laptop or an OS X box, or better yet, my jails, that is not bad. Heck, I'd use that in my DigitalOcean instance for that Mumble server I run.
Exactly.
Yes.
It'll be nice to go back to a Qt-based App Cafe again. That's just my preference.
Cool.
So where did you say the documentation is for this?
That's api.pcbsd.org is where that's at right now. If you'd like to look and kind of get the status of where we're at with it. And I think I have that set to update like every hour or so. Whenever Drew makes a change, it shows up there.
So that's where people should go if they want to follow along with how this is coming along. And you said it'll start shipping in the monthly releases soon?
Yeah. So your current releases, you'll start seeing packages available for it. And by the way, I might say I'm not really in love with the sysadm name. I kind of did that as like a play on badmin, right? If somebody has something cooler, I'm open to suggestions.
I'm perfectly fine with that one, actually. But maybe if somebody comes up with something very clever, maybe it'd be better.
Yeah, if there's something really clever somebody comes up with, I'm all for renaming it. But otherwise, it's just kind of dry. But, what do you get? I mean, we're a bunch of Unix guys.
It's also descriptive of what it does.
That's the important thing. It's like, if you call it poudriere, it's like, what the hell does that mean? It's a French word I don't know the definition of. It's like, it's the magazine where you keep all the explosives. I'm like, that doesn't sound like something I want to run. What's that?
Right? This will blow up your box.
Yes, exactly. Was there anything else you guys wanted to add?
I don't know, Ken. Do you have anything you want to mention on this?
Not at the moment. I mean, we've given you a lot of the big picture ideas and stuff. And while we might not have a lot of those features right away, like in 1.0, please be aware that I am coding up the backends and the frameworks so that we can easily just extend them instead of having to rewrite anything. So we should be able to add all these really cool features in a really short amount of time. Yeah, I'm trying to be very future, looking ahead when I'm writing this thing, seeing all these ways we want to do it. So for instance, the for one client to connect to multiple servers at once, I've already got that set up. In our current client, I have a separate core class so that we can technically, later on, maybe we'll load up, 10 or 12 of those at once, depending on how many servers you want to connect to. So we've already got putting all the frameworks in place so that we can get all that nice functionality really, really quickly.
Well, it's good to see that being done in the design so that we don't get to the point of, all right, so we had 1.0 and now we need to rewrite it all from scratch in order to support all the features we want to do in 2.0.
Plus, I'm putting so much time into it right now, I'd really hate to have to redo any of this again later.
Yeah. Well, so for me, I love FreeBSD, right? FreeBSD's been where it's at for me for a long time. And for me, being able to do this API in a way that lets FreeBSD retain its FreeBSD-ishness is important. In other words, this needs to be a package I can install I can use it. If I don't like it, I can remove it, and no harm done to my system, right? And it also needs to not cripple my muscle memory was a big one for me. Like I still am always going to use SSH to do some things because I'm just fast at it, and that's how I do things. Which means if I tweak an rc.conf knob, I expect that to show up in the API.
Yes, that was the part that made me fall in love with this, was the fact that it wasn't replacing my existing config files with like an SQLite database that would get out of sync or you know, I'd make a setting change and it would be completely ignored. I just really like the idea of integrating with what's there rather than replacing it. And you know,
we like to supplement, not necessarily supplant things in FreeBSD, but just supplement and provide this as a way to provide a nice REST and WebSocket API to FreeBSD. So, I mean, that just sounds like a win to me. I would personally use something like that.
This sounds like a killer feature. I'm very much looking forward to this.
And the best part is, if the client's all generic Qt, it means when we get bug reports on PC-BSD, well, those bugs will probably fix things on Windows and OS X too, and vice versa. So, like, it's just kind of a win-win. And if we get the API stable, I mean, the cool thing is you guys could change stuff on FreeBSD, Allan. So if you come along and start throwing in some libucl stuff, well, no big deal. We'll just update the API to talk to that file now instead. No, not a problem.
We don't even need to touch the API itself, so the clients don't even need to change. You just go adjust that one function in the library or something so that it behaves slightly differently when looking at that config file.
Should be cool. Okay, well, that's all I had on it. So if anybody wants to help out, of course, join us on the PC-BSD channel, and we'll be happy to discuss this till you get tired of hearing about it.
Yep, that's pound PC-BSD on Freenode.
Freenode, yep. That's right. Cool. Well, thanks so much for interviewing, I guess, both of us for this one, Al.
Yes, thanks you guys for talking with us. So, no, I think it was quite good.
Okay, we're back. Hope you guys enjoyed the interview. I know that was a lot of fun to do. So thanks, Allan, for switching it up a little bit there. Okay, so we got a news roundup to get to, but before we do, we need to mention our sponsor this week, which is going to be DigitalOcean, and of course the website for that is digitalocean.com, and we don't have any fancy /BSD Now something or another for DigitalOcean.
We have the coupon code.
We have the coupon code, which is a free BSD Now, so you have to remember to put that on there. When you create your account, type in that coupon code, and you'll want to do that because that gives you your $10 credit, which will let you pretty much run a VM for 2 months for free, which is a very good deal, especially with a VM this beefy. We're talking on an SSD, and you can get FreeBSD pre-installed on it. They support Linux, I think, too. There's something else they do. But if you want, you can throw OpenBSD or NetBSD on there. Instructions are floating around the internet, so it'll show you how to do that. So you'll have to check that out. But DigitalOcean makes it super simple, guys. You just pop open a web browser, log in. You can spin up a droplet in a little bit under 60 seconds. So pretty stinking fast, and then upload your SSH public key, and then you're good to go. I mean, you're ready to log in. You have access to it, and you can start doing things. They have great tutorials up on their website, too. I was able to use that to figure out how to run jails in FreeBSD, and they had some recommended firewall configuration and whatnot for forwarding things. So it was like, just copy and paste this. I didn't even have to try and remember the syntax by memory or anything. It was ready to go.
They also have an interesting tutorial here, how to route your web traffic securely without using a VPN by just using, a SOCKS tunnel over SSH.
Interesting. Okay. That's some neat stuff. So yeah, these guys just bring a lot of value add considering it's just so much more they do aside from offering the actual droplets. So check it out today, guys. And if you talked in over there, tell them you heard about it here on BSD Now. I know we'd appreciate that. Okay, so the roundup here, I know we teased a little bit of this, but those Dragonfly guys, man, the Intel 9915 driver, they don't mess around there. But in their ongoing quest for DRM awesomeness, they've now merged changes to bring them up to Linux 4.1 kernel features. So some of the notables they have there include that Valley View support is greatly improved, so much so they're not even considering it preliminary anymore, which that's a big step. Also, they mentioned Skylake got some support improvements as well, including a lot of runtime power management went in, and that turbo and sleep states should now be functional as well.
Although Skylake isn't fully supported until 4.3.
Okay. Well, getting there,
Yes.
though. It's getting there. But also some good improvements. It looks like a lot of power usage stuff got added in this commit. Some setting GPU frequencies now can be set to their hardware minimums, which is good.
Yep.
And the enabling out-of-box of the DRRS, which is dynamic refresh rates. We talked about that in a past episode about what that does. But that's being enabled by default as well, so that ought to give you some power savings. And they've even begun importing some of the preliminary work for Broxton, which is an upcoming Atom system on a chip.
Yeah, so that's great if you have those little embedded devices. And they also apparently fixed some problems with the DisplayPort driver and intermediate link rate support for enhanced DisplayPort.
That's right. So yeah, those guys, man, they are just really flying on that. So good job, guys. That's awesome.
Oh, and I just see they have Zen GT client-side support, which is a pair-virtualization system that allows virtual machines to tap into the rendering engines of the GPU. So that you can let the virtual machines have access to the video card if you have, say, one of those D3s with the built-in video card.
That would be very neat. So yeah, lots of good stuff in this one. So I assume this will be this is all in their head. So whenever the next release is, you may need to grab that or grab ahead now if you'd like. But that was a pretty good commit. I see lots of files got tweaked and touched here, and it's neat to see that they were able to bring that up to speed so quickly. Man, it's like almost every other week now we're talking about something new they've pulled in there.
Yeah, they're doing a good job.
But, very cool. Okay, well, next up we have, this is probably one of the most complete FreeNAS home server brew guides I've seen out in quite a while. But we have a nice article, it looks like John Ramsden wrote, which walks us through his homebrew FreeNAS server setup. And he talks about his use cases, kind of typical for most home users. He's going to be using the system to serve both media and as a backup target for other systems. But he gives us some good rundowns here of what he's actually putting in this box to make it all go, starting with Fractal Design Node 804 chassis, Supermicro X10 SL7-F motherboard.
Yes.
This looks like a couple, what do we got? A Xeon E3 1231 V3 CPU.
Yep, that's
and
Haswell? Yes, Haswell.
yeah. And let's see, some Samsung memory here. I think he maxed it out at 32 gigs. He's using some of those SMC SATA DOM devices as well for boot. He's got 232 gigs of those, which is
Does he
pretty
have some
stinking
pictures
cool.
of those in here?
He does. Or no, he has a link where you can click and then.
Well, he does have some build pictures. I just wondered if you could see the SATA DOMs. That's just a bare motherboard there.
Yeah, I might need to try using some of those at some point. That's pretty neat. I like that. But also he goes down, let's see, power supply, UPS, 6 of the Western Digital 6 terabyte red HDs. So that's definitely going to give him plenty of storage there. And he goes down his case fans as well. I mean, very detailed on what they're using to do the build. But of course, seeing this out of DOM is neat. I don't know if you're able to show a picture or if you found one there of what he's doing with it, Allan.
Yeah.
But
he notes specifically that the FreeNAS forums have been shifting towards SSDs or SATA DOMs because of problems with the USB sticks failing, which I had a server where, because of the number of drives in it, I couldn't boot off the internal system. And I used a pair of USB sticks, but then they both started failing at the same time. So at one point I was running like 3 and I was like swapping them constantly and instead of us mirroring them and stuff. And it was being a giant pain. And then I just broke down and bought 2 SSDs and stuck them in there. And it's been great ever since.
Yeah, see, I think so. DOMs might have been good for you.
Yeah, so they're basically a little circuit board with the header clip, and it just kind of plugs right into the board there.
Nice. So what was really surprising was, especially for a homebrew, he did a really thorough burn-in process on the sucker. He did memory testing for 46 hours. He did disk testing using the SmartCTL long tests. I mean, all that jazz was done here, and he provides all the commands and how he did that. So if you're going to try and duplicate into your own homebrew FreeNAS, you may want to take a look at this. Even goes into detail on how he set up all the fan thresholds as well. So, I mean, if you want to get all the specs on that, that's all here in the article.
Well, especially if it's a system you're going to run, say, under your desk or something, you really want to tweak the fans where, you want to keep the system as cool as possible because it'll extend the life a lot, especially the hard drives. But you want as little noise as possible if you're going to have to sit beside the thing constantly.
Yeah, that's why I appreciate my FreeNAS Mini. It's sitting about 3-4 feet from me right now, and I don't hear it at all. which is how it's supposed to be. So quite nice. But yeah, all in all, really good walkthrough. So if you've been looking for the courage or you want some steps maybe you can follow to roll your own FreeNAS box, this may be the one you want to read to check that out and kind of follow in his footsteps. Okay, so what's this next utility I'm seeing here, Allan? Something you posted here. It looks like managing SSH authorized keys files. So what's going on?
So basically, it's a little utility written in Python that allows you to manage your SSH keys a little easier. So basically, on your one system somewhere, you create this little config file, the .claviger, and you make a list of your keys, right? So it's like, here's the SSH key for my laptop, here's the one for my desktop, and here's the one that I use for work, right? And you give it those, and then you make it a list of your accounts. So it's like, here, here's myprivateserver.com, and my username is my username, and make sure that on it are the keys for my laptop and desktop. But for, root at myotherserver.com, it's like myprivateserver.com, so it will automatically inherit everything that's already there. But also I would like to make sure that my work key is also on that server. And then you say, if there are any other keys in that file, remove them. Only the keys I specify should be there. Whereas, for my work machine, I make sure that both my work key and desktop key are there, but my laptop key isn't, because I never do work from my laptop, and if my laptop gets stolen, I don't want my work thing to get compromised.
Sure.
And then you could say maybe keep other keys true, because there's a key in there that for some backup script or something that's running, and I don't want to purge it out. So it has quite a few different options to basically control how you want to manage your SSH keys. Nice. You can define a server called default and set some settings, and then you can create some other servers, and you can say, hey, this server is like that server, so it copies all the settings, and then you can make overrides if you want or not. And like I said, there's you can list specific other keys that should be allowed in the file, which won't add them, but if they're there, it won't remove them. Or you can say, keep any other keys that are there, or remove any other keys that are there, whatever way you want it to do it. And it also has, you can specify your different usernames and stuff, and you can create abstract hosts. So because of that like system where you can inherit a host, you can define a host that's not a real one, but it's just your basic settings. So you can be like, this is for all this type of server, and this is for all that type of server. Beyond extending it to like we have for your specific work case, you could also use this for managing keys for a number of different people. If you have the bunch of servers for work, you can have a list of the different people that are allowed to, and who's allowed to access what server.
I may have to try this out. Have you actually run this in production?
No, I just, I
first time you've seen it?
think JT found this and threw it in notes, and I was like, hey, that's a cool, we should cover that.
This is actually quite cool. I may need to give this one a whirl here. Only thing is, it's not in ports yet. Somebody needs to throw that in.
It's a simple Python port, so it shouldn't take much work.
Yeah, I would expect so. You can pip install it, but there's just something nice about having it registered in PKG properly. That is.
Yeah, cool. At work, our Puppet thing manages something like this for us, so it's not a big deal, but it'd be nice to have. It also actually has support for defining the user to use to get and set the authorized keys file, so you can actually give it access to use root to go and change other people's keys if you want, or some other user. But it defaults to obviously using the user you would that you're modifying to do it, because that's usually the only person that has access to their authorized keys file.
Okay. Nice. Well, very cool. Again, I'll have to check that one out again. There's just not enough time in the day to play with all these cool things.
Exactly.
So speaking of cool things, this is an interesting one. A few days back, it looks like another one over at Unix Men. They posted a nice tutorial of a setup of doing OpenVPN on a FreeBSD 9.2 box in particular, using Active Directory for the authentication, which I was surprised when I saw it was a 9.2 FreeBSD at first, but hey, people are still using it. So he said in this particular setup, though, what's interesting is FreeBSD is running, of course, the gateway and the OpenVPN server. In their case, the client desktops are all running Windows 7, and the domain controller is on Windows 2010. And the setup portion on FreeBSD actually looks like the least painful part of the process. I noticed here it's just all thanks to having the OpenVPN auth LDAP port. Although in the example, they build it directly from ports. I'm not sure why.
They don't have all the tutorials seem to do that Probably because if they're used to 9.2, that was the first time package was new, right?
Yeah. But if you're doing this on a 10 or an 11 current box, I would just do package
like in this
instead.
case,
I think
there's no custom options or anything. Like in the
maybe they turn on docks or something.
In the Snort example, I think for Snort SAM, you had to turn on the IPFW support. But for in this case, most of the times you don't need to.
That's right. And by the way, I should mention, so we when we roll our packages for PC-BSD, if there's options like that you guys find useful and want to have on by default in your packages, just email me or send it in, post it in IRC. 9 times out of 10, it's a reasonable request, and we'll just flip it on because I'd prefer to have more things on and not require people to have to build the port by hand if we can help it. But in addition to showing how they did the configuration on the BSD side, which of course is very nice, what makes the walkthrough also nice is they have so many screenshots showing exactly how they did the Windows configuration with Active Directory, so you can actually look at it and compare notes that way. Part of the walkthrough is also going to detail how they created their OVPN file for importing on the OpenVPN clients, which I did that once before, I think for an Android client. That was kind of a pain figuring out what syntax it needed exactly in there for it to work. But again, very helpful. They did all that for us.
You end up with, every user in your Windows network just has this file. They double click on it. It runs OpenVPN and connects via the VPN. That's a lot nicer way to set up OpenVPN than manually, giving people certificates and so on. Just let
that's right.
Let the Active Directory handle all the certificates.
So yeah, this is a pretty neat idea. So any sysadmins, you may want to pay attention to this one if you guys are trying to do something similar with a lot of Windows clients.
Someone was really adventurous. Building this as a plugin for pfSense would be epic.
That would be very cool. Yes, take a look at that. Somebody make that happen.
Or even free NAS, if you wanted people to be able to access the NAS on the road to get to the OwnCloud instance or whatever you're running on it.
Okay, so we got some Beastie Bits for you. We got some feedback and questions, of course, this week. But before we get into that, we're going to mention our last sponsor real quick here, which is going to be tarsnap.com/BSDNow. And you know what that is. Come on, it's Tarsnap, guys. Number one, you should be using it. And if you are, we thank you. And I know Colin thanks you. And everybody who helps with Tarsnap thanks you. It's awesome service. And they have that fancy new website, which I'm sure you can show off your own. With awesome
colors and pictures and everything.
That's right. It's all professional. It's crazy. But anyway, come on, guys. Tarsnap, it's still a great product, regardless of whether you look at the website or not. Just make your account, put a few bucks in it. You probably won't have to go back there very often because that few bucks will last you a long time. But once you've downloaded the client, of course, you can add it pretty much any way you want. I mean, there's clients made for everything, including even Windows. So it's all out there. But of course, if you want to compile it yourself from source, just to be extra cautious, there's no problem at all doing that. And they make that easy. The source code's right up there on the website. So you can do that yourself and just, again, for the security conscious, verify that you're running exactly what you're supposed to. But go sign up today, set up an account, and start doing your backups. Just throw it in cron. It'll take you just a couple minutes.
I have a great example here of the Alice user who has about 7.5 gigs of data on their hard drive that they want to back up. So they back that up, and then they make a change. That's about 2.2 megabytes of new stuff. But after the deduplication and compression done on the client side by Tarsnap, that's only 0.8 megabytes. And so they upload that, and it costs less than a cent. But on the Tarsnap side, the Alice is storing 15.8 gigabytes of data total, because that's her 7.5 gigabytes of stuff plus all the changes of all of her hourly or daily hourly backups for quite a long time now, and all that costs $3.95 a month because you only pay for what you use. So if it starts to get too much, just prune some of those older backups you don't need. But with the deduplication, those backups don't take up that much space because you're only paying for each unique block each time. Not all, backing up the whole thing multiple times doesn't actually cost you anything extra.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So yeah, you should set up that today, guys. Just don't wait. Don't wait until after you've had a hard drive die on you or you've lost data. Just do it now. Save yourself the hassle. That's what we've done here. Okay, so first up, we have some Beastie Bits here. Looks like NetBSD made a little bit of news here where they've included dtrace by default. So it looks like that's on now. That's pretty cool.
If
So
you're on,
we'll start seeing some NetBSD recipes for using dtrace here soon.
I imagine most of the recipes are fairly similar. Maybe some of the trace points are slightly different, but dtrace now works on AMD 64, i386, and eARM, all the different platforms.
That's pretty slick. Well, again, that'll be helpful for a lot of folks doing some debugging there. Okay, so next up we have FOSDEM 16's approaching, and I guess, Allan, you're leaving for that tomorrow morning, right?
I catch a plane tomorrow morning and fly through Montreal and then on to Belgium.
Nice. So how many days is that for?
The conference itself is just Saturday and Sunday, so I'll arrive Friday morning and then head back Monday morning.
Okay, great. So you'll be back in time for the show next week. Perfect. Well, hopefully you'll enjoy that. We have a link here to their schedule, their BSD track specifically.
Yes,
so you'll have to check that out.
On Sunday, there's an entire room dedicated to just BSD, which is actually a big deal. FOSDEM has like 40 concurrent things going on at once. And so getting a room for an entire day is actually quite a big thing. And there'll be talk from a bunch of different people. The Edge BSD will be talking about stuff. I'll be there about ZFS. Jean-Sebastian will be talking about contributing to the graphics stack on FreeBSD as he tries to get more people to help out with that and get that moving. Roger will be talking about the Zen update on FreeBSD. People from the Haiku project will be talking about, could Haiku actually become a BSD? Interesting. Bernard Spill will be there talking about Open and Libre SSL. There will be ElectroBSD. And doing reproducible builds, so that'll be interesting. And then Baptiste will be talking about reproducible packages for FreeBSD.
I want that too.
The reproducible packages.
Ever since we talked to Pavel, about the whole kind of open trust thing, like that.
Well, I think even Baptiste for reproducible is mostly just about doing Delta updates and doing better incremental builds, where rebuilding all the packages but not rebuilding ones that didn't change.
That'd be nice. That'd be very nice. Well, cool. Sounds like you guys didn't have a full schedule, so hopefully you have some good stories to tell us about when you get back from that next week. Okay, so next up we have a call for testing. It looks like over on OpenBSD land, there's some changes to how malloc works to speed up Firefox in particular is one of the use cases here. But it looks like Mark Tennis posted this asking some different Firefox users to test a patch that changes the thread-safe malloc strategy from spin locks to mutexes. So here's what he wrote. He said, Firefox makes a lot of concurrent malloc calls. The locking to make malloc thread safe is a bit suboptimal. This diff makes things better by using a mutex instead of a spin lock. If you're running Firefox, you want to try it. It makes video watchable on some machines. And if you're not running Firefox, you still want to try it to make sure it doesn't break things. So definitely give that a whirl if you're over on OpenBSD. This is going to require that you have a current 5.9 beta system. So grab the source, apply the patch, rebuild, and let them know. Hopefully they can figure out if that's working and get that committed.
This somebody in the comments also points out that, browsers are the headline of this. A lot of other heavily threaded software makes a big difference here. So they said even things like MySQL or MariaDB, Bacula, or even just RRD tool and Singa or Nagios and Memcache and all those kinds of things should also be tested.
There's a comment here, too, a little earlier today. It said they already committed it, so you don't even have to apply the patch. Just grab the latest 5.9 head.
And let them know if it broke anything.
Yeah, if it breaks or if it's faster, let them know. I'm sure they still want the feedback on it. Okay, so what do we have next here? It looks like also some OpenBSD stuff now. The pair of virtualized drivers are current. It's now possible to run OpenBSD within AWS. Interesting. So what do we have here? It looks like it's on the forums.
So this is about using what Amazon calls enhanced networking, which is basically uses SRIOV. So the host machine that's actually running your virtual machine at Amazon has a big NIC in it that can basically pretend to be a bunch of smaller NICs. And then they kind of almost do hardware pass-through into the VM to basically take most of the work of talking to a network card driver out of the VM and just let it talk directly to the real network card. And they're apparently working on getting that going on AWS.
Nice. Okay, and lastly here we have a link. It looks like the PC-BSD handbook, which if you've not looked at that before, that's a fantastic handbook. Drew Levine and some others have worked on that, and it's quite complete, quite large, but we now have it translated entirely into Spanish thanks to a bunch of community members who've put a lot of time and effort into this. So Solo BSD pinged me about this on IRC, so thank you guys so much for the work you've done on this. That's incredible, and we're glad that we can make that available for users in their native language now.
Yeah, that's a huge undertaking to translate the entire handbook like that.
The entire handbook. Yeah, that's a big deal. So it's for version 10.2, which is still the current version of PC-BSD. So a good deal. So check that out today, especially point that out to your Spanish-speaking friends who maybe are looking for some native translation of docs. Okay, so first up this week on questions, we have Clint who writes in, and it looks like he's asking about a ZIL on a partition. He says, hey guys, listening to the latest episode, and one of the feedback sections has a user asking how to use a partition as a ZIL instead of the whole disk in FreeNAS. He said, I wrote a blog post about this a while back that might be helpful to the person asking the question, and then he points us to his github.io link there, where there's some details on that. So yeah, if that's something you're interested in doing, or if the original questioner wants to see how he did that, he has all the list of the commands here, the various gpart commands to create the partitions, and then adding it as a ZIL.
Yeah, because they had 200 gigabyte enterprise SSDs, and those are expensive, and you really don't want to use the whole thing on the ZIL when the ZIL is never going to be bigger than 20 or 30 gigabytes. So you created a 30 gigabyte partition and aligned it and everything. Use that for the ZIL, and then that leaves you with the rest of those two SSDs you could mirror together and run the operating system or something off of. And that's what I've done with nice. The two that I've had in each of my new machines.
Okay. Well, great. We appreciate you sending that in, Clint. Okay, so next up here we have Federico writes in. He said, hi, Allan and Kris. I've been following the show for a while, and it's become my favorite source of BSD news. I have a couple questions for you. Number one, will LibreSSL replace OpenSSL in FreeBSD? I know you guys replaced it in PC-BSD, and I know there's an ongoing project to replace it in vanilla FreeBSD. So I'm wondering if it's too far-fetched to assume it'll arrive in time for 11.0.
I would say that while Bernard is working on a project to make that an option, I don't know if that would actually become a thing. The biggest thing is that in the base version of FreeBSD, that one has to be supported for the entire life cycle of that version. So that doesn't mean just, say, FreeBSD 10.2. That means 10.0 through the end of 10. Whatever.
10.3,
so
whatever.
That means that whatever version of OpenSSL is chosen for 11 has to be, you're basically stuck at that version plus security updates for 5 years. And LibreSSL, their life cycle is 6 months, and they've broken the API a bunch of times, and that's the point of what they're doing. And so while it's a cool option to use from ports or whatever, for the base system, I don't know that it makes sense.
Well, I think the other thing you were talking about, making just SSL private in base, makes more sense, and it becomes less an issue. That
solves the issue in two different ways. A, it makes sure all the programs that rely on it use the one from ports, whether that's OpenSSL or LibreSSL. But it also means that as part of a security update, we could ship a newer version of OpenSSL as the one in base, because the only things that use it, because it's private, are fetch and
maybe some PKG's initial bootstrapper.
Yeah, and a couple of there's like 8 programs or something like that in the base system that do. I think libarchive uses it for something to calculate checksums or something. Yeah, there's a couple of things like that. But there may be some complications with that as well, but that's something Bernard and I hope to get to play with a bit at FOSDEM. And secondly, he says the DMA or Dragonfly mailer has already been imported into base. Yes, Baptiste pointed that out after last week's show, that he had actually already imported DMA into FreeBSD's base. As far as are there any plans to remove SendMail and make DMA the default mailer, I think Baptiste ran out of time to work on that, but if someone else would like to pick it up, I'm sure he'd be willing to share his notes.
Sounds like you've already done some of the hard work. He's got it in base now. We just need to turn other things off and strip things out.
I don't know if there was anything else left to it, or if it was just a matter of switching a make that conf flag so that SendMail no longer gets built by default and DMA does, and then it's still there for people that want it.
No, it's neat. Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on that, of course. I'll be excited to see if that happens. Okay, so you want to read this next one here, Allan? It's a little bit long and rambling.
Yes. Ghislaine emails in about FreeBSD versus Linux versus Illumos. I hear a lot of people, a lot of things about how FreeBSD is great compared to Linux, and I've used a lot of FreeBSD for work because of jails and because
So before jails became too light,
because they need disk and CPU isolation at the time. Although FreeBSD has CPU isolation now for jails, but it's not as good as it could be. And they moved to Linux vServer instead. So as Linux vServer is less and less supported, this one-man project who's not capable of moving as fast as the kernel nowadays, and he's looking back at using FreeBSD. I noticed that jails still have no real CPU, disk, or RAM usage resource. Actually, FreeBSD does have CPU and RAM limitations now. It's called RCTL for resource control, and it's built into the kernel by default now. You just have to enable it with sysctl, and you can set per program, per user, or per jail limits on CPU and RAM, and I think a couple other things like open files and so on. However, it doesn't currently let you limit disk because it's quite a bit more complicated, actually. It'd be really nice to actually build that into ZFS, where you could actually set, quotas, IO quotas or something on per data set. That would be amazing. I know lots of people would love that, but it's actually quite complicated to do. And then obviously the other great pulls to FreeBSD are dtrace, ZFS itself, and all the other enterprise features and so on. So you looked at this, and it seems like the greatness that a lot of that greatness actually comes from Illumos or OpenSolaris. And OpenSolaris already has support for KVM. They've got Linux emulation now, like FreeBSD, and they have Docker, although FreeBSD has Docker as well. So he thought he'd ask us what's the best choice in the BSD family of OSs for a semi-hostile guest, where each guest is a different customer. So, not just your own application load. He says, pair virtualization has native network and disk performance, but full virtualization, even with VirtIO, you lose up to 30% of your performance. So the advantage to something like Illumos is that their full crossbow zones are kind of like jails, do have a bit more on the resource control, and the networking stuff especially is a little better than VNet is currently. Although, again, like everything in FreeBSD, it's being worked on, and you're welcome to pitch in. The main problem with Illumos is the community is very small, so there's not a lot of help available. And the other thing is, Illumos itself isn't a distribution you can just download. It's kind of a Git repo, and that's it. It's really, even more than FreeBSD is said to be, a toolkit for building an operating system. You have to get something like OpenIndiana, I think, is one of them that you can get to actually have something with an installer. Although the installer is like the old OpenSolaris one. It's a little special and strange when you go to use it. Like the key combinations you use to move around in it just make no sense. And as far as what applications you can run, it can get quite limited. So I think FreeBSD is the best compromise, but if you really want, then go ahead and try Illumos. It might be better than, it's probably better than Linux. I don't have much experience with it though, but I know there's a lot of good stuff in there, and still some interesting things going on, but we try very hard to slowly convince those Illumos people to come on over to FreeBSD. Bring all your cool toys with you. Bring all your cool toys with you. Just
don't leave your toys behind. Bring it all with, and we'll just merge that all in. Okay. So last up, we have Carrie writes in. And it says, hello, I have 3 questions I've been meaning to ask. He said we could spread them out over multiple episodes, but why not? We'll just we'll end with one long set of questions here. So he says, ZFS on ZFS. This has come up several times recently, but I have a specific use case you might be able to comment on. I'd like to have snapshots of my Dropbox folder. Since Dropbox doesn't have a FreeBSD client, this means I need to use Linux. Using ZFS on Linux isn't a problem, but I'd also like to run this in a VM, ideally using Beehive, which means ZFS on Linux on a Z file or a file on ZFS. What's the best way to set that up? NFS isn't an option since Dropbox uses iNotify, so it needs a local file system. Should I just give up and use either dedicated hardware or keep using QEMU and KVM on Linux to run the VM? Currently, my Dropbox folder is on a ButterFS for snapshots, and I'd like to move away from that. Well, understandable.
Yeah, so running it with KVM on Linux isn't going to help, because then you're either going to have ZFS on top of ButterFS, which has exactly the same problems, except for there's this additional one you're running on ButterFS, and it's probably just going to eat all your files. So yeah, ZFS and ZFS mostly is just going to have slower performance. It's not necessarily going to kill anything. It's just
not that it's bad.
Well, it's suboptimal. And you know, you have to play with the caching a little bit, but you know, in this case, it'll do what you want it to do.
Okay. So he says his second question here is about caching FreeBSD packages. Well, just use PC-BSD. Okay, the next question.
Well, really,
Okay.
the package does this already, right? When you download a package, it goes into, I think the default is var cache package, and it sits there. And then if you end up, if you uninstall that package and try to install it again, it won't re-download it. It will just use the cache version.
That's right.
Your problem is
There's
that
the package clean command to even print that out.
if you want to free that space back up, because it can build up to I think it's 2 gigabytes on my laptop because of how many packages I have with all the GUI stuff. The downside on the FreeBSD official repos, they rebuild things once a week. So there's a pretty good chance that there'll be a small bump in that package, and so you might not end up keeping it around that much. But yeah, it is already smart enough not to download the same thing twice.
Sure.
And the other thing is you can actually copy that var cache package directory to a second machine, and then when you do the install there, it won't re-download anything that it hasn't already had.
Yeah, you could share them amongst it.
Yeah, you could do an NFS share of that and have all the machines on your network share that one, or have a jail share it with the host, and then you're not going to be downloading the packages multiple times.
This is why I explored the idea of using IPFS for us for a while there, because that's exactly what this would solve. It would look out on your local network first to see if anyone already has a copy of something cached and use that as opposed to reaching out to the internet over, I guess he has a slow link here, 3.5 megabits a second.
Yeah.
Ouch. So that's why there would be a use case for that. But hey, I guess we don't have to read the whole part of the question, but that was basically
he was talking about the apt cacher NG and how it does that kind of a lazy mirror thing, including being intelligent about expiring the cache for metadata. Package already does all that. So it basically does an HTTP head on the metadata file on the website and says, hey, is it newer than what I have? If so, download it. If not, don't. And then that metadata file has the hashes of the files, so it verifies in the cache that the file in the cache is actually what you want it to be and not broken or old. And then it will avoid downloading whenever it can.
Cool. Okay, his last question is ZFS pull replication. He said, I'm aware of ZXFR, and it's great, but I'd rather do pull replication so that the backup host doesn't have to allow access from the clients. Is there a script or a relatively easy way to set up pull replication?
So ZXFR can actually do both. If you use the capital O option, you specify the machine to go and get the snapshots from. So that's pull. And the other flag minus capital T is target mode, when that's where you say, take the snapshots from here and push them to that target. So we can do either. And if you follow the instructions in the ZFS handbook on the FreeBSD, as part of the FreeBSD handbook, it has the instructions on how to do it without root. So on the machine you're going to pull from, you create a new user called replicator, and give it only the permission for, say, ZFS send, or maybe ZFS send and ZFS snapshot. With the ZFS allow subcommand, basically delegate it permission to do those two commands, and then ZXFR will SSH in as that replicator user, not as root or anything, and then run the ZFS commands to send the snapshot over to the backup machine. So the backup machine can go to each machine and pull in the stuff, and it can all be done with no root access.
See, so it's already all there.
So ZXFR will already do that.
Great. Well, hopefully you can use that then. That'll solve the problem you're trying to have. Okay. Well, great. Well, that was actually the end of our questions and feedback this week. So as we close up the show here, guys, we just want to mention, of course, send your questions, comments, or if you have any ideas, topics for the show, stories you found on the internet, send that over to feedback@bsdnow.tv. I know a lot of you have actually started doing that. We're getting a lot of email now with links and suggestions, and we're using a lot of those during in the show notes. So we really appreciate you guys sending that in, and please keep doing so, because there's sometimes just stuff that we don't catch. We don't all read the same feeds. So it's good to do that. But send that in, of course, if you know somebody who we can interview, or you'd like yourself to be interviewed because you're working on something cool, let us know as well. We'll schedule that. And Allan and I are pretty flexible, so we'll try and make that happen, whatever time works best for you. I mean, last week we got up, 9 a.m.? We were doing interviews last week on a Thursday and Friday, so it's doable. We can make it happen, especially if you're not in our geographical location and the time zones work out in such a way where we have to do it at a different time.
Yeah,
that's
we've
fine.
Done ones from Australia and China where we had to do it at 8 o'clock at night, and we've done ones from Europe where we had to do it first thing in the morning, or our live showtime works fairly well for Europe because it's evening there. But yeah.
But still, we are willing to work with you. So don't be afraid that you won't be able to work it out. Just let us know, and we'll find a way to schedule it in. But of course, thanks for watching. And Allan, we hope you have a good flight.
Yes.
Enjoy your time in FOSDEM. And we'll look forward to hearing your stories when you get back.
So, if you're going to be at FOSDEM, make sure you come by the BSD dev room and say hi.